I want to talk to you guys about change and how I made the change to not get my MFA. And I'm going to do that while I pack up my studio to potentially move out permanently, as I'm unsure about that. This past week, due to an issue with my housing, I had to completely move out of my studio, and it's uncertain how long I'll have to be out for, and we could get asked to leave and completely have to start over. And this type of sudden change isn't new to me. It is one of the only things that I've gotten accustomed to trust. At my last studio, the drugstore in Kansas City, all of the artists that were working in there were evicted in order for the space to be sold and turned into luxury apartments, complete, ironically, with a rooftop pool that would be placed right where the roof used to leak on us during substantial rains. Luckily, no roof leaks here, but every place I have rented has had some little issue that over time becomes a much bigger problem, and this was no exception. Moving makes me realize how change, especially in housing, is hard, because I have a tendency to accumulate. That's partially the comforting desire to nest and get comfortable somewhere. It's a human thing, but the other part feels like sort of a habit or safekeeping. Regardless, it's all part of my default setting, the things we are unwilling to question in the moment. And as I've been moving, I've been remembering that change is vital to our experience as humans. As Octavia Butler says in the parable of the Sower, the only thing we can trust is change. With that topic of change, let's talk about why I left the dream of academia behind to start leading creative retreats instead. When I left art school in 2013, I did not have a doubt in my mind that I needed to go get my MFA or my Master of Fine Arts. I knew my desire to teach was an unshakable fact. I wanted to continue the lineage of my professors and the learnings they had bestowed upon me. Taking their advice, I dedicated all of my free time to working almost entirely for free in the art scene in Kansas City. When I graduated, that same month, I immediately started an art blog, I took over my friend's apartment gallery, and I started community organizing to make things better for artists around me. I needed a CV that was going to be full of varied experiences, so that way I can show I would be worth it, not only to prestigious grad schools, but later hiring panels at institutions that could potentially offer me jobs. It is the industry standard and expectation that people work for free in the arts in order to qualify for jobs. Again, I'm going to say this is delusion. It is the industry standard and expectation for us to work for free. And that has not changed since the pandemic. And while I dig on this stuff, especially around the high cost of art school, the bullying I experienced, and these kind of delusional expectations I was handed for my career, I was fully bought into this when I was younger. As I said in a previous video, my 3-page CV was proof at how much I drank the Kool-Aid and bought into the cult of the art world. But there was a reason. There were quite a few positive experiences in the latter part of my education that contributed to my mindset and serious dedication. I felt safe and confident that this free labor was going to pay off. Junior and senior year, I was working with faculty who really understood me and my work, gave me space to explore all the weirdness in my practice, and did a really good job cultivating community between the students. They are the ones who inspired me to teach. I wanted to help grow and nurture other artists, build community and solidarity, and point people towards their best creative selves. But looking back now, 15 years after I stepped my first foot into foundations, I was inheriting a dying trade. The life of an adjunct in 2024 is bleak. Most colleges have gutted programs that allow for adjuncts to make the jump to full-time faculty. To quote Zoe B. in her great video on the topic that I'll link below, 70% of all teaching positions across U.S. universities are now adjuncts, meaning there is little to no upward mobility to move from the precocity of teaching contingent to tenure-track positions. Adjunct pay is another issue, as it is entirely contract-based, meaning that there are no benefits, no health insurance, and no guarantee that classes will fill. You are also usually limited to a maximum number of credits you can teach per semester, between 3 and 9. And the payouts sound amazing. $3,500 for a 3-credit-hour course to teach your favored creative method to young and curious college students? Hell yeah. But the reality is, there is a big ceiling on income. A maximum of 3 courses per semester is $10,500 if you're getting that $3,500 payout. If you're lucky and get all courses to fill, that's a yearly salary of $21,000. Maybe it will be a little more if you teach at other schools or pad your pay with part-time gigs and some art sales, but then you are working more than full-time for a salary that is close to or on par with the federal poverty guidelines. The grim reality I came to face is that I couldn't fathom how to survive on $1,750 a month before taxes. My existing student loan payment was almost a quarter of that. I couldn't justify taking on more debt for graduate school, a thing I was required to do in order to qualify for these positions, and somehow pay that back. None of the adjunct roles qualify for the promised potential of public student loan forgiveness because they weren't full-time. And in 2017, 4 years into my dedication to volunteering as a curator, art writer, and community organizer, I hit burnout because I was diagnosed with a chronic illness, an autoimmune condition that would require I carry a decent healthcare policy in order to access treatment. This was a hard reality to face, but the delusion I was experiencing was way harder to crack. I was so close in community with so many active and compassionate faculty members. I longed to be their colleagues, and they all thought it was a logical next step for me to go to grad school and get my MFA. I was blinded by a lack of understanding that a lot of these people were getting ahead by coming up just a generation before me and having way different opportunities. Some of them had much different financial and familial resources than me. I was working in retail, selling shoes, and finding that I was in a dead end. I thought that maybe with all the work I've done, maybe there'd be scholarships available for me. So despite my diagnosis, in 2019, I ended up paying for, applying for, and getting accepted to a couple of different graduate schools for my MFA. Tuition at the cheapest option was going to run me $80,000, more than double my undergraduate cost. I couldn't do it. In 2020, I officially declined right before the pandemic, and I haven't once thought since then that I missed out on something. My life is so fundamentally different now. And when I look at the work and life of so many of my friends that have gone through these programs, I don't necessarily see a lot of them being happy. And that's heartbreaking. Knowing that these people that I really care about went through these programs and they're not better off because of it. Turning away from paths like this is hard. It's why people resist change, this concept called the sunk cost fallacy, that you can't give up on something because of how much time and effort you've put in. That's your sunk cost. I was so committed to the idea that I was building everything in my life around the need to have my MFA, my ego-driven desire to be taken seriously in the art world, an idea that you have sunk so much time and energy into something that even if it's a losing battle, you have to keep going. I was on this path for 7 years. I threw away my 20s. Instead of spending that time having fun and celebrating my youth, I spent almost every Friday and Saturday night at exhibition openings, writing reviews, and spending late nights in the studio. That is the work I thought I had to be doing, and I wanted to be taken seriously. And looking back now, I genuinely forgive myself for having this attitude. I think that trying to talk my stubborn 20-year-old self out of this delusion would have been impossible, because every person that told me I couldn't do it or I couldn't sustain the way that I was working, I saw that type of no as a reason to prove them wrong. Maybe I was listening to too much Beyonce. But a thing that made it easier to turn away from the path I had been in for 7 years was that I got a new job. I started teaching free painting and drawing courses for Apple on iPads. And while it was still technically retail, that job gave me hope of being on the cutting edge of some kind of democratization of arts education. It felt like the perfect antithesis of art school. I loved teaching my skill for others for free instead of behind a massive tuition paywall. But alas, the pandemic inevitably caused that program to change in ways that did not align with my values anymore, and I could no longer recognize the job I was hired to do in 2019 from the job that I was doing when I left my role last year in 2023. Simultaneously, when I looked at what had happened to arts institutions between 2020 and 2024, I realized I put these places way too high up on pedestals. I didn't respect them anymore. Definitely not in the same way. I saw them as places of great prestige, and I recognized the games that I was playing was all to try and fit into them and their needs. I was burnt out. I was angry. These places didn't align with who I was as a person at all. Artist-run and co-op spaces continue to give me hope, and those are the things that I still love to support when I can. But the big name powers that were continuing to pretend as though the pandemic never happened and that they could just go on with business as usual, and still they somehow think it's okay to continue fostering ideas of scarcity and competition between us artists, were competing for scraps in a way that is not benefiting any of us. This is ridiculous. I am so burnt out from trying to work like this. I'm angry. I'm let down by all of these institutions and the beliefs that they gave to me. I was also, these changes rocked me to my core. I knew that I couldn't keep moving in this direction, so I investigated everything that I thought I was working towards and whether or not the people above me on the ladder that had done the work were actually happy. And I was finding out that they weren't. I took 2020 off from making art, and instead I focused that time on learning to play music again, a thing that I had abandoned in art school because of bad advice from professors who said, you can't be a musician and an artist, but really they were just insecure liars. I also started learning how to hike and go out in nature, and that in and of itself was one of the most healing experiences for my inner tiny creative. It helped me start to feel human again, to remind me of why I wanted to be an artist, those tender and curious emotions that led me to art school in the first place. I felt like I was connecting to parts of my creative inner self that I had long since forgotten about, and suddenly it dawned on me. That's what I wanted to try and teach to others. The pandemic has shaken up everything, and when I look back at where I came from, I recognized my desires were the same. At the core, I wanted to still teach and make space for others' creativity. I knew and felt that I had developed a skill set worth sharing with others. I just didn't know where I belonged. I felt like art academia was inaccessible. I watched my close friends working within it struggle, some even teaching at 3 or 4 schools at once, while others left the field entirely for different careers. And I was working in tech, and I felt like that was going to push me further and further from my desire to help others be creative. Both of those experiences made me realize, though, that I didn't want to be teaching in any kind of walled garden. I didn't want the limits of devices or tuition to keep me from being able to share what I knew would benefit others. On a hike in 2021 along the Buffalo River in Arkansas, I came across this scene that I painted on my iPad in Procreate. In this moment, I realized that this was my ideal classroom. These little benches, set as a tiny amphitheater in the forest, was where I felt the most calm, the most at peace, and incredibly inspired to make and paint. On this hike, I scrawled a note to myself about wanting to start a retreat center, to integrate the things I had learned over the years from courses in yoga, meditation, hiking, and other wellness practices with my technical art knowledge and desire to teach creativity as a whole. The idea and seed of the Persistent Bloom Retreat Center was born. From then on, this was my core ambition. I was no longer going to be an art professor. I was no longer going to teach at a 4-year college of art and design. I didn't believe in those places anymore. Instead, I would find a way to someday, somehow, lead creative retreats. And there's always a book that influences my thinking. In mid-2021, while I was on this hike, I had just finished rereading Ben Davis's 9.5 Theses on Art and Class. A dense read with a few really solid takes. But the core message of the book is that art and class struggle are linked. The part that is permanently etched into my brain, though, is this one quote. Creative expression needs to be redefined. It should not be thought of as a privilege, but as a basic human need. Because creative expression is a basic human need. It should be treated as a right to which everyone is entitled. This reread shifted everything for me about what I thought was the right path forward. I wanted to find ways to make creative education more accessible. I fought internally while still at my tech job to try and revive this and work with this philosophy. But it wasn't until I went out on my own with this dream of becoming an art educator and artist independently that I was able to get clear on my desire to teach others and start these retreats. The retreat dream started with just teaching classes. I built partnerships around the Bay Area. I started with a lavender farm up in Santa Rosa called Bees and Blooms, where I launched affordable beginner and intermediate courses there. Those courses helped me realize that accessible arts education was possible. And so then I started making partnerships with local community centers and arts organizations to teach elsewhere. There were so many humans outside of academia that wanted to learn about art and had goals of prioritizing creativity in their lives. And this was giving me hope. So at the same time, I got myself a premium subscription to Zoom and started launching private virtual art tutoring. And I've had a few students learn from me. But this summer, though, I had a friend that helped me realize that these tutoring sessions could actually be the start of leading creative retreats. I had convinced myself that I couldn't start hosting retreats without first finding a way to buy land with 5 or 6 friends up in Northern California. Again, I think I might be reading the science fiction of Octavia Butler a little bit too literally. Yes, I would love to have land in Humboldt, but 5 or 6 friends of mine are all going to be saddled with equal amounts of student debt, and that makes getting a mortgage really hard. But this friend helped me. These retreats could start happening online and could be scheduled anywhere. Rather than focusing on a particular place of land that people have to travel to, again, another financial barrier, I could expand the things that I work on with students to be more like the art professor I wanted to be over a decade ago. This summer, a few folks from my Substack applied and worked with me on the seeds of these creative retreats. And if you're watching this, thank you for your support and your trust to try this with me. It has been so awesome, and I've actually been floored and gotten misty-eyed over some of the shares that some of you have made after completing this retreat work. It is so cool. I absolutely love working in this virtual retreat format with folks because it's been able to adapt to exactly where people are in terms of their financial need or where they want to go in order to access their most creative self. It's been dreamy to help people with creative organizational strategies, painting techniques, sketchbook prompts, color theory, drawing assignments, and more in these custom-built lessons. I've been meeting with folks over Zoom to discuss their learning goals and then create customized retreat lesson plans for them. And some people have completed their work just cozied up at home, and it's been really cool seeing some people use just recycled materials in order to do all the assignments. And then other people went ahead and booked campsites to go be with the assignments and nature at the same time. And I can't wait to keep doing this work and sharing more about it. And that's most of what I talk about over on my Substack newsletter. So you can go sign up for that for free. And there's also a paid tier if you want to support the work I do. In leading the retreats, I've really been thinking back to that Ben Davis quote again and considering how I can make accessing creativity more affordable and accessible. I am teaching myself Figma at the moment, and I'm learning how to make a downloadable workbook version of the retreat experience. If you remember, earlier this year, I released a zine that was like version 0 of this idea. I had drawn all of my outdoor gear for a backpacking trip, and then I turned it into a zine with prompts and checklists to help other people do the same. So I'm taking that, and I'm making it even more accessible. Because 1, I think backpacking is hard. 2, hiking is hard too. And 3, I want this to be a thing that can help people be resourced no matter where they are in their learning journey and where they are in terms of their abilities. And I want to make sure that I'm being as inclusive as possible when I'm making this work. Soon, that little creative retreat is going to be out. It is still in progress. So definitely, if you want to find out when it is coming out, you can sign up for that little Substack, and I'll definitely be talking about it here on YouTube, so subscribe. In doing these retreats, I've also gone back to this really fun thing that I learned many years ago in therapy called a core values exercise. And I'm going to link a core values exercise little worksheet in Notion for free down below that you can just try out for yourself. I do this about every 6 months just to make sure that I'm staying aligned with the things that I'm doing in my life and making sure that I can say yes to excitedly to the things that I'm saying yes to. But for the retreat center, I decided to do this core values exercise, and the result I got was joy, creativity, rest, balance, and community. So with that, I'm not just thinking about these paid options, I'm also thinking about free options too. So I've been really investing a lot of time and energy into my Discord server, It's free for anyone to join. Every other week, I put different prompts up in the art prompts channel. I try to be as active as humanly possible. I am one person, but I try to be active in there and share the things that are going on in my studio practice in my life. So if you want to connect, you want to build some community, I'm on there, I'm active, and we also do this bi-weekly sketchbook club. The sketchbook club is also totally free, and the way that we decide on which day we're doing the sketchbook club is through ranked choice voting. I say that sketchbook club is very broad as a creative makerspace. If you want to prep your meals for the week, if you want to knit, if you want to crochet, if you want to work on hand building some ceramics, anything that you want to do, seriously, just come join us, make and create together, and let's build community, because I think that is really important. I want to experience creative rest with others and cultivate a sense of joy and balance with other people. So this is pretty much it for this video. This is how I'm working to imagine and try and take a utopian approach to building an alternative art school. It's where my head is at instead of the land of MFAs. So if this has resonated with you, or you have questions about wanting to go for or wanting to approach your own MFA journey, leave them in the comments. I love to participate with discussions when I can. If this video does blow up and there are thousands of you down there, hop over to Discord. It's going to be a whole lot easier for me to respond over there than down below. But until next time, stay creative and find your own way to persistently bloom. Thank you so much for being here and your generosity and time to watch to the end. I'm going to go ahead and put up a couple of different videos that you can take a look at here. And then, of course, because I am here on a social media platform, I must tell you that one of the best ways that you can support the channel is to like or subscribe. So until next time, see you.